This is the Criterion Creeps podcast, and tonight we're talking about Blade Runner from 1982, directed by Ridley Scott. The tagline for this film, "Man has made his match. Now it's his problem." And
That's
the
goofy.
and the synopsis of this film from Letterboxd. In the smog-choked dystopian Los Angeles of 2019, Blade Runner Rick Deckard is called out of retirement to terminate a quartet of replicants who have escaped to Earth, seeking their creator for a way to extend their short lifespans.
Cool.
It's very direct and to the point.
Do they ever actually say his first name in this movie? Does anyone ever call him Rick?
I don't.
Because that was weird when you said that. You're like, Rick Deckard. I was like, Rick?
Yeah, I don't know if they do. It's always Deckard.
Who the hell is this Rick guy? I don't want to know him.
So first of all, RJ, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Do androids dream of electric sheep?
I've heard that they've been known to, but that's a case-to-case basis. Like, what do you dream about? Cheeseburgers?
Of an unending darkness.
I had some weird drems the other day, actually. Like,
no.
Do you want to? I actually keep notes of these.
No.
So there was one. There was a.
This isn't the Dreamcast, sir.
There was a grade to crust concrete one. I'll save that for next episode. But this is my note from a dream I recently had. Ice Adventure. Joe Pesci was a tailor. Susan Sarandon and Jerry Seinfeld. Then back at my mom's old house, a Batmobile rocketed a helicopter. So what do you think? Is that electric sheep or like what is that?
I don't know what that is.
I didn't just make that up. That's just what I dreamed about, dude.
So RJ, let's break this movie down. Have you ever read the book?
I have indeed read the book like 3 years ago.
That's better than me. I haven't read this since junior high because I wanted to be all into that Blade Runner when I was
fuck, of course you did.
Oh yeah. No, when I was like 13 years old, I'm like, yeah, I want to be really into Blade Runner.
You're totally that kid. Oh, I'm really into. What's your favorite movie? Like Shrek or Space Jam? I like Blade Runner, but the director's cut, not like the theatrical.
Hey.
When you're like 12 years old.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll get there. But yeah, I made a point of after probably renting the Blade Runner director's cut, which would have been like a hot ticket then in 1992, 10 years after it initially come out. I was 11, 12 years old when that rolled on out. So I was watching it. I probably watched it in 95. And all I knew for that point was, I was a nerd kid getting into like science fiction. I like that Star Wars, that Star Trek. I started reading like, maybe it was like not Starlog magazine, but there was like some sci-fi magazine that was out at the time. And, you couldn't read an issue without it mentioning Blade Runner. And I'm like, oh, it's got Harrison Ford in it. Harrison Ford's so awesome. He's Indiana Jones and Han Solo. I mean, and now he's Blade Runner. And so it's like, yeah. And then I remember probably watching the movie and then reading the book because the novel that was probably very popular around that time at your like mall bookstore would be the one that's got the Blade Runner cover, and then at the bottom, "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" And yeah. I remember reading the book and trying to talk to my language arts teacher at junior high who saw that I was reading it, and he's like, "Oh, have you ever seen the movie?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, I didn't like the book at all." It's like,
there's a lot of those.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the book, and tell me about PKD, because I got some opinions on PKD.
Okay. Well, I have not read the book for 2/3 of my life now, so I have not much recollection of it. But I remember like a lot of emphasis on deserts and animals, and finding animals in deserts and weird places, and having a very different feel than the movie.
So, coming fresh off of it, and at the time when I read it. I had seen Blade Runner, and spoiler alert, Blade Runner was never like my favorite movie or anything like that. So when I read it, it was way after the fact that I had seen Blade Runner a couple times, and I was like, all right, whatever. I was like, I would like to check out the book though, because I like Philip K. Dick a lot. I think his work is sometimes difficult to read because of the way that just his language sometimes I think is kind of dry. So it's a little bit tough. Like there, a few of his, I haven't read a ton of his stuff. I'd say like maybe half of his works, which is, I guess that's a lot. But I think some of his stuff comes off a little dry. Even like his popular stories. Like I know, I have a couple of those Library Congress packages that have like a bunch of his novels. There's the one that has Man in the High Castle, Three Stigmata of Eldritch Palmer, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and then what is the last one? It's like it's not Ubik, but it's something like that.
It is Ubik.
Is it Ubik? Okay, yeah. So that's probably his most like out of those Library of Congress books. That's probably the most well sold one because it's got all the big ones in it. Yeah. But anyways, my point was even Man in the High Castle. I really liked that story, but there were certain times where I was just like, it's kind of a slog to get through just because, I don't know. I think it's just older writing for me, I guess. But I like Philip K. Dick. I like all of his stories. I think he doesn't get as much credit as he should because of the things that he does. I think people really forget his influence, like especially on sci-fi. Like things like Minority Report and Blade Runner are obvious. But
they're Darkly, and now we got the Man in the High Castle TV show.
There's that. Well, and Bryan Cranston has that Electric Dreams TV show.
Oh,
on Amazon Prime, which is it's like a collection of his short stories, and I don't know who else is in it. I should have watched it, but I was too busy watching fucking Ridley Scott movies because the movie is quite a bit different from the book. But long story short, Jarrett, you brought up the book. And the book is quite a bit different. I don't remember the desert aspect, but the one thing I remember a lot is the emphasis on the animals.
Yeah,
like it is such a big part of the book, and it's mostly just because it's like it's the whole root of the story, basically, because it's where it's all like there's so much emphasis on empathy, and where it's like the learned empathy of humans, where after they destroyed the world and they lost all the animals. And then they were like, oh, fuck, we missed those guys. So they all brought them back. And it was like this point of privilege to have an animal. Like rich people had real animals.
Right.
But even the artificial animals were really expensive. And it was this kind of thing where it's like if you had one, it was something for people to bond to and kind of relate to. Kind of like how, pets are now, I guess. But it was like so much more exaggerated, whereas like this is the only way people can feel things anymore because of what has happened and where the world went to. Whereas like people do need like a pet goat to feel like care for something. So there was a lot of that in the book. There was more other stuff too. Like you get more of the hunting down replicants and stuff, because I think you get all 6 in the book, but
right.
Whatever. Yeah, it's the book. It's mostly just the animal stuff is what I took most out of that. Where I was like, man, I really dug the animal stuff, and I was like, that's not. It's kind of in Blade Runner. There's enough of it in Blade Runner, but it's not. You could tell like when they were writing it, they're like, that's not important. Let's take that shit out of there.
Yeah. So there's like the weird history of this, like so. What's the guy's name? The author of the book. So Hampton Fanchner, he who wrote the initial screenplay for Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. He read the book, he loved it, and he's like, yeah, let's pitch it. But, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Not the sexiest title. And I mean, in this, Decker's just a run-of-the-mill bounty hunter. So there was another book. It's called The Blade Runner from 1974. That's a science fiction novel by a guy named Alan Norse. And it's about like smuggling medical services.
What kind of services?
Medical services. It's like he's a blade runner. So that's the concept. And so it's
very literal.
Yeah, and then so at one point, I guess William S. Burroughs was tapped to do a story treatment for a film adaptation of the Blade Runner, and so he wrote a book called Blade Runner, a movie. That never happened, and then
fuck, that would have been bad.
Well, it's just like come
on, that would have been horrible.
I have no idea, and so they took this term like, "Hey, Blade Runner, that sounds good, right?" And they used that instead because you watch the movie, and at no point in any of the Blade Runner films do they ever say, "What's a Blade Runner?" It's just like
Well, it's
you're
just
kind of like
accepted.
another cop essentially. Like you're like a special cop, but you're not a
Well,
cop. But you're a bounty hunter, kind of. Like you have
the way
you have
the way
you have judicial powers when it comes to
mm,
doing what is needed to do your job.
the way I always kind of interpreted it was like even lazier than that, where it's like, you know how private detectives are called dicks.
Yeah.
I guess it's just Blade Runner. It's just a euphemism for being some kind of detective or like a narc.
But it seems to be an actual title because there's like other Blade
It is.
Runners. Yeah.
That's why I meant why my
Yeah.
interpretation was lazier than
Yeah, sure.
any real thing. I was just like, oh, whatever. He's a
So
Blade Runner, I guess.
so there you go.
Uh huh.
Proper acknowledgement to the source material.
There you go.
There you go. So this movie, first time I watched it was because it's heralded as the one of those like big deal science fiction movies. So I would have
Sure.
rented this on VHS from Blockbuster. It's got that really adult looking, great poster art, that great cover, and it had this expression on it, director's cut, and it also letterboxed, and you're like, whoa, what's this all about?
What does that mean?
And then it was like, I remember it was like a bad thing when you were like a kid because it was like, oh, it's got the black bars and it makes the screen all small, which back in the day when real estate was a premium, when you're watching your screen, having these unnecessary black bars, you're like, oh, God, let's just bring this back.
Yeah, that's not what you want.
No, not at all. So I remember watching this and I didn't get it, because I was a kid. And I was like, what is this about? It looks cool, but what's it about? I don't get it. So it made no sense
People
to
still
me.
don't know what it's about, Jared.
People still don't know what it's about.
Hmm.
So is this movie, though, that's like, it's stuck around for a really long time. I have bought it on VHS. I've bought it on DVD. I've bought it on a second, like 5-disc edition DVD when I didn't have a Blu-ray player.
What about Laserdisc?
I know Laserdisc missed me by, but I
You
did
chump.
finally get the final cut Blu-ray that came out in 2007, and
Okay.
that was the big deal with that was that there was the work print version as well included, because this movie's got versions coming out of its ass. RJ,
It's what?
coming out
Of?
ass.
Okay, sure.
Sure. So
Sure.
we've got the work print. We have the U.S. theatrical version. We have
Hmm.
the international cut, which is
What is that?
it's got like some more blood in it, which
Okay.
actually I believe is the version that is on the Criterion LaserDisc that came out. So that's like kind of the at that time was the
It's kind of
best
cool.
way of watching it. And then there came the day where there was like a screening of a work print somewhere along the line that Ridley Scott didn't know about, and then there became interest in doing a director's cut. And then there was the director's cut that came out in 1992 that took out the Harrison Ford voiceover narration, which I watched for the very first time this week, and
Oh,
apparently they put that version out, and Ridley Scott was like, called it a director's cut because that's as good as it's going to get, even though I'm not totally happy with it. And that was the version that like most people started to like really turn a corner around with.
some people prefer the narrated version, Jared.
Well, RJ, let me tell you, they're wrong.
How come?
So
Or are we gonna get there?
so very wrong. Oh, we'll get there. And then now there's the final cut. And I really like the difference in these cuts though is like minutes. Like we're not talking like the usual Ridley Scott put on an extra 20 minutes, 40 minutes. I got to tell my version of the story. It's like just in like
Sure.
small little tweaks. Like it's kind of like almost like Star Wars special edition stuff, but nothing like as egregious as like, hey, let's put a new Jabba the Hutt in. It's just like,
Hmm.
oh, we had a really bad like stunt job done where we had like a woman with a really bad wig running through the plate glass and it never looked right. Let's fix that. And then they do. And like
Hmm.
if you didn't have that pointed out to you, you'd have no idea it was there. So stuff like, oh, the sky's the wrong color in this shot. Let's fix that so it all fits in. Like subtle things
Hmm.
that like, hey, that's not a bad thing. And yeah, it's one of those movies for a long time when I would rewatch movies more often. I try to make a point of rewatching Blade Runner about once a year. because
Still?
No, well, I haven't watched it I haven't watched it since the letterboxed era of movie watching happened. Like I haven't probably watched it other than right before 2049 came out. That's probably
okay.
So I watched it, but before that, it'd probably been like 8+ years. But I always had tried to make a point of watching it like every year because I always felt every time I watched it, I got something completely different out of it. It always felt like a different experience. And even like in this past week, watching the U.S. theatrical cut the one week and then watching the final cut the next week, I had a completely different response. But there's an obvious reason for that because holy shit. That Harrison Ford voiceover narration is so bad. I can't even imagine like that being my Blade Runner because of like misplaced nostalgia, and it completely is because it ruins the movie so much. The audio level, at least like on what I was watching, is so much higher and doesn't sound like anything that belongs to the movie. The dialogue wasn't written by anybody involved with the actual writing of the movie. As Harrison Ford tells us in the Dangerous Minds making documentary, it was just
Dangerous Days.
Dangerous Days.
Dangerous Minds is a movie with Michelle Pfeiffer.
That's
my
right.
friend.
That's right. There's a guy in a room.
Yeah, just some dude
in sweatpants or something.
Yeah, no, he was in a tracksuit.
Tracksuit. I see. Okay.
A tracksuit.
A tracky with tracky bottoms, and he's like up to his waist, and he's typing away, and he's like, "Here you go, read your lines. You're contractually obligated." And Harrison Ford claims to this day that he gave his best. He tried his damnedest. And
is that what he actually said?
That's a paraphrase, maybe.
Oh, I thought his thing was, I don't give a shit.
There's lines, RJ. Let me read you some. When he's sitting there at the noodle bar, sushi. That's what my ex-wife used to call me, cold fish.
Okay.
Some more. The charmer's name was Gaff. I'd seen him around. Bryant must have upped him to the Blade Runner unit. That gibberish he talked was city speak, gutter talk, a mishmash of Japanese, Spanish, German, what have you. I didn't really need a translator. I knew the lingo. Every good cop did, but I wasn't going to make it easier for him. Terrific. Or whatever was in the bathtub was not human. Replicants don't have scales. This is like
great.
And it's Harrison Ford in his like droney bored
like
voice.
This.
Yeah, monotone. Like
humans don't have scales.
Like Tyrell really did a job on Rachel, right down to a snapshot of a mother she never had, a daughter she never was. Replicants weren't supposed to have feelings. Neither were Blade Runners. What the hell was happening to me?
Know what I'm saying?
The one though, Jesus Christ. Skin jobs. That's what Brian called replicants. In history books, he's the kind of cop who used to call black men niggers.
Whoa! In the actual movie?
Yep.
Wow. Terrific.
And you have such things as like the voiceover narration kicking in like while Roy dies at the end of the movie. I watched him die all night. It was a long, slow thing, and he fought it all. So that's the wrong version of it. I don't know why. Here it is. I don't know why he saved my life. Maybe in those last moments, he loved life more than he ever had before. Not just his life, anybody's life. My life. All he'd wanted was the same answers the rest of us want. Where do I come from? Where am I going? How long have I got? All I could do is sit there and watch him die. It's so... Oh.
Hey, I think the word you're looking for is eloquent.
Eloquent.
Eloquent? Yeah. Oh, terrific.
So, yeah, watching this movie, I go back. I've always gone back and forth on it. Do I think it is
on the movie itself or the narrated?
The movie itself.
Okay.
Blade Runner is a movie. I kind of assume that most people listening to the 150th episode of the Criterion Creeps podcast are familiar with Blade Runner as a movie.
Should be.
Harrison Ford. He's in a trench coat. He's tracking down some replicants. And Roy, old
Roy who? Batty?
Roy Batty.
Roy Batty?
He's on
Canadian
he's
boy, Rutger Hauer?
Canadian boy.
Is he not Canadian?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Wait, born in the Netherlands. Okay, he's not Canadian.
He's a Flying Dutchman. He's a good personal friend of Paul
Why did I
Verhoeven.
think, why did I think he was Canadian?
I don't know.
Okay. Is Edward James Olmos Canadian?
He's that guy is
Doubtful.
that guy is so into Blade Runner.
So I'm just gonna interrupt you.
Yeah.
Because I do that. So you know when Edward James Olmos is speaking his Hungarian talk,
About horse stick?
I recognize that. I didn't even realize that was a line in this movie, and I was watching this week, and he said "lofus," or I think he says "lofa," but I know it is "lofus" because in my family, Jarrett, we say the "lofus" as the horse cock when you're trying to talk up somebody. You say like a "lofus," he's got a horse cock, and I was like, "Whoa, did he just drop a horse cock in this movie?" And I was pretty blown back by it.
Fascinating.
Do you think he's Canadian? James Hong is Canadian, surely.
James Hong. So this movie it kicks off with the scene that I like didn't realize how hilarious it was to watching it this time. We got is it Brian James?
Kevin James from
Not-
King of Queens?
Yeah, everyone's favorite. Kevin
Brian.
James.
Yeah, Brian. It's spelt weird, but
Yeah.
yeah, Brian James.
Brian James. So God bless him. He died too young. He is talking to Holden, who it always confused me when I was younger because I was like, this guy looks like Harrison Ford and sounds like Harrison Ford, kinda. It's really odd, and you're like, I guess he's a Blade Runner too. And then there's this whole thing about is Deckard a replicant?
Do you want to squash that
no.
right now, once and for all? Not like what your take on it, because I, for one, feel like you shouldn't give a shit. That's not the point.
Ridley Scott says he is.
Yeah, Ridley Scott says he is. He's not, but I don't think that's the point of the movie.
It also makes no sense.
Yeah, especially when 2049 comes out, because it's like 2 replicants. Come on.
But yeah, and they don't even talk about that either. So I
Mm.
mean, they just sidestep that silliness because anyway, we're going to talk about ambiguity and lack of thereof later. So the scene of what's a tortoise? The what? It's like our podcast. It's our podcast in a nutshell. That back and forth.
You mean like interrupting?
What?
Huh? What? What's doors?
My mom had a horse.
Do you want me to tell you about my mother?
I just got off night shift.
Do you want me to tell you about my mother, Jer?
I'd prefer not.
Okay.
So anyway, that scene's so goddamn funny. And it gets blown away. And I always thought that looked kind of weirdly fake when I watched it when I was a kid. I'm like, oh, what's that big choom sound? And he goes spinning up through a wall. You're like, whoa, that's pretty hardcore.
Looks cool, I think.
So yeah, Blade Runner. How do I feel about this movie?
Tell me. Okay, wait, before you say that, we can just say, first of all, this is the episode where we jump the shark, and we will gain many, many haters, I believe, because of this episode. Maybe not because of Blade Runner itself, but all the things that follow. So what do you think about Blade Runner, Jarrett? What's your hot take on this movie?
I've always been like, I like this movie. I think it's pretty interesting.
Good.
It's always fascinated me. It feels like a dream watching it.
Cool.
But I felt like I kind of went around a corner this week after watching the Dangerous Days making of Blade Runner documentary, which I think greatly increases my appreciation and enjoyment of Blade Runner a great deal. Because if anything, this movie is just like such a technical marvel of cinema. It is everything I want in movies: practical effects, atmosphere. Again, the story isn't the clearest. It barely has a story. Scenes just kind of like happen. There's like not a lot of chemistry and the main romance of it, I guess you would say, between Deckard and Rachel. Like according to the documentary, it's like, oh, Harrison and Sean, they didn't really like click. She was a little young and bashful, and there's these shots of like footage of them doing these scenes that they're supposed to be like getting it on and getting sensual, and she just starts giggling, going, I'm sorry, I can't. And Harrison Ford's head just turns, and he's just like classic Harrison Ford, angry. thinking
angry and
I should
slow.
I should go back to being a carpenter. Is is the look on his face. So amongst other things, this documentary actually made something click with me about Harrison Ford as a performer, because Sean Young's talking about how technical Harrison Ford is. Like, he'd be there and saying, turn your head this way and that way. This is where the lights hits you. Like, and he's like, no, it's like, yeah, he's just looking at, like, this is how scenes work. This is how you lay out a shot. This is how the light's going to capture your face. He lays it out in this way. You're like, that makes so much sense why I've always found Harrison Ford, like, so machine-like in the way he acts. And when he's at his worst, he is amongst one of the worst actors of all time. When he's,
give me an example.
Well, the classic go-to in the Red Letter Media verse is his reading of the line "part-time" from the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull movie, where part-time. I always go to that, and that voiceover narration on the theatrical cut from '82. It's just Harrison Ford phoning it in, trying to be a noir character, and
yeah,
that's what this movie is. Like, it's a neo-noir, but it also gave birth to the future noir that everyone started making Blade Runner knockoffs. They didn't have the money, they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the stars. They all started making little Blade Runner movies that just are like, they look like it, they're kind of cool to watch, but they're all missing that essential, like, ingredient of Ridley Scott's confidence in making this movie that's like, hey, I'm going to make a heavy metal live action movie. It is going to look like a Mobius movie, like, in reality. Like, it's just like a comic. I'm going to make it look exactly like that. I'm going to get the best people in the business. I'm getting Doug Trumbull. I'm getting Sid Mead. We're all coming together, and we're making, like, the greatest science fiction movie ever made.
Yeah.
On a pure visual technical level. And that's what this movie is. Without any argument. It's amazing watching those effects and watching this documentary lay out how they did this stuff. And this documentary is 3.5 hours long, and I think should be essential viewing for people who have opinions about Blade Runner, because I think this will explain better than this podcast why Blade Runner is
everything that it is,
and why, as we'll discuss later, Blade Runner 2049 is not what people think it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. Dangerous Days. If you had asked me outside of the podcast to watch a 3.5 hour documentary on Blade Runner, I would have told you to go fuck yourself, and I would have never watched it. But I'm actually really glad I did. That documentary is fucking awesome, man.
Yep.
It's very meticulously crafted, where it's like, this is this part, this is the pre-production, here's the production, here's this, here's that,
and total honesty
from
completely. Everybody, no one has anything to gain. Like, they have like the producers of the movie who, like, for all intents and purposes, are kind of the villains of the story, and they're there,
sure.
and they're giving their story and their explanations of why they were doing it. And the fact that this movie didn't really make money, it wasn't a success. It was kind of like, oh, the movie came out, and it came out in 1982, the same year as E.T., the big go-to for the thing. It always is like, well, E.T., no one wanted a dark future, and the movie audiences weren't ready. That's like kind of like whatever. But it's like, no, there's honest reactions from people saying, yeah, Blade Runner, like, I was in the movie and I felt like it felt cold. It didn't have the emotion of working on the movie. It's like a really strange movie. Like, it
I like the one where it was like, we had a running list of all the people who quit during the movie. It was just a list of people who just quit. They're like, fuck this movie. But I do like what you say, where it's like the producers are the villains, and they're just here, and they're like, fuck. They're like, what was I supposed to do? They're like, think about it. Ridley Scott, on the day one, he was 10 days behind schedule. Is like, come on, what would you do?
Or like the shot of like the bowl with the fish head being dropped on the counter. Oh, we got to do about 14 takes of that, and you're like, well, what was wrong with that one? What's the difference? And it's like kind of the hilarity of that, of like this director who's like over his head, and he's just like bought into his own hype. He's like, God damn it, I directed Alien, and now I'm going to direct this, and I'm going to show you all. Yeah,
there's that, and then I also kind of liked how like. They all kind of gang up on was it like Bud York?
Yep.
or whatever, and they're like, yeah, that guy was a real fucking asshole, and they cut to him, and he's like, yeah, I had issues with what was going on. He's like, what do you? He's like, what do you think? I'm gonna invest like $1 million and not like be a part of it? He's like, I wanted a good fucking movie. He's like, what he was making was shit.
Who also is a defender and says, "Oh, everyone I've shown it to likes the voiceover narration," like his good close personal friend Guillermo del Toro.
He makes like he draws awareness to that too. He's like, I don't know, maybe they say that because I'm their friend and they know me and I like it better. So he does like he's self-aware. He's a self-aware wolf. Yeah, and then Guillermo del Toro. I put on the Criterion LASERDISC every day.
Why are you doing a Denis Villeneuve voice?
Oh, Denis Villeneuve? Because I don't know how to do accents, so I'm gonna do French Canadian instead of Mexican.
Spanish.
I am Guillermo del Toro. Hey.
Wow.
Oh. Hey. So what were you talking about? Were you talking about Blade Runner? Or
yeah,
Dangerous
yeah.
Days,
We're talking about we're talking about Dangerous Days being,
Okay.
I think, absolutely. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's fantastic, and it's like a great. Like, you should watch Blade Runner, followed by this making of, because I think it is probably one of the best making of documentaries I've ever seen. That I think like adds so much to the film.
Yep.
Itself. So yeah. Let's talk about. Let's just be fast and loose with this movie, RJ.
Hit it.
Let's just feel it out. So this movie opens up, beautiful Vangelis music playing over this utterly terrifying shithole that you watch this documentary, finds out it's like, oh, you know, it's just a bunch of like embossed metal steel. We put a little bit of lights in between, put a little bit of visual flair to it, and it's like, holy fuck. Like, before that, I had no idea how they did that scene, and it's like one of the most stunning visuals still in any movie I've ever watched. It's terrifying and beautiful all simultaneously. And then we get this eye, the big close-up of an eye looking onto it. And none of it's like, whose eye is it? It doesn't really matter. Is it Holden's eye? Is it our eye? It doesn't matter. It's just an eye taking in the whole world. And it's just such a, like, for like his movie being distributed by Warner Brothers, it's like, who, it doesn't go back to it, never answers it. It's like, it doesn't matter, because by then you're like into this world. A guy's being interviewed with a weird machine that's just like being asked a bunch of questions about animals and how he feels about it, and then he blows a man away.
What does he do though to that guy?
He messes him up, and apparently in a deleted scene he's okay, and he's like, oh,
What, that guy lives in a deleted scene?
Yeah, he's like in a like iron lung kind of device.
Lord.
And Deckard visits him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm just catching up on my reading," and they cut that out wisely.
Yikes! Yikes! Sorry, were you saying something?
No, not really.
Are you just running down the movie?
A little bit. You can talk
Well,
about
I think the next thing's about noodles.
Noodles. Yep. We get a overpopulated, lived-in, wet, dreary world with just the masses of people. And contrary to the book, which is about a depopulated, underpopulated world. In this one, it's like shoulder to shoulder, like grime.
Well, that's like the point, I think, in the book, where it's like there's all these incentives to go to the new colonies, and that's where the android problem actually happened. It's like, oh, that happened where real people are, and then they flee to the deserted Earth because no one would want to be there, and they're like, well, no one will book for us here. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit, Jarrett?
Yeah,
it's the point. So yeah, they get into some noodles, Jarrett style.
We got my boy M. Emmett Walsh after Harrison Ford's delivered, who's still wolfing down his noodle bowl.
Hell yeah.
One of the things I noticed too was like M. Emmett Walsh in his office, which I guess another detail from the documentary is his office is in the Union Station, which is a construct that they actually still in the Union Station to this day, which is kind of like, here you go, let us use our space and you can use this continuously. Fun. So Emma cool. Walsh, he's got an oscillating fan in his office, and you're like, in the future you'd think that they'd have like a central vac system that would take out that air, take all that smoke that Ridley Scott's piping in every which way. But no, this movie is noir. Venetian blinds abound because it looks awesome. Maybe that's just
the best way to go.
It looks awesome. That's the reason.
Well, you like Venetian blinds?
Well, in movies, they sure look pretty spanking cool.
Because of the way the light shines through?
That's right. That's all that Ridley Scott cares about. It's light, smoke, and wetness.
What kind of blinds you got in your house?
I've got some Venetians.
Like drapes?
I got a little bit of everything.
Like, I mean, I got Venetians, and this is 2019.
We get an origami chicken because Deckard's a chicken.
Is he?
He is.
What's he running away from?
Responsibility. I don't know.
Okay.
But we get one of the hoariest cliches that maybe comes from this movie is enhance. Enhance.
Enhance.
Enhance.
Are you thinking of Super Troopers when you say that?
Oh, of everything. Of like all your favorite TV shows and movies that just so, hey, I got some grainy footage, enhance that and make it look better. Like in this movie. It's like, well, Blade Runner did it.
Yeah, but Jarrett, in Dangerous Days, they explained that when this movie was released on home video, it caught on because people were able to stop, fast forward, and enhance the image, unlike anything other has been done before, which is actually probably true. It sounds like I'm making fun of that, but that documentary is wicked, so whatever.
Yeah. You know what has not aged well in terms of capturing the year 2019, the very year that we reside in currently?
What's that, Jarrett?
People like having photographs. Like no one has those anymore.
Oh, photographs?
Yeah, printed photographs.
I got pictures.
Do you?
I have a picture I got from a place once.
Wow.
Is that a good story?
But you know what? People still drink Coke.
That's true. What about Atari? Is Atari still around?
In people's hearts.
Well, that's the only like faded one. Because what was it? Coke, and is it Sony or is it something else?
Oh, yeah.
I think it's Sony.
But yeah, it's definitely Atari. I don't know about Sony.
It's someone like Sony.
Yeah, it's someone like that.
But yeah, people still drink Coca-Cola, Jarrett.
What are you doing over there?
Oh, can you hear that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'll mute you while I move my mic thing.
Oh my god. We have 25-year-old E.B. Farnham.
Who?
Oh god.
Who is E.B. Farnham?
The man from Deadwood, and is in this movie as well as was it F.B. Sebastian? Another two-letter last name man?
S.F. Sebastian.
Or J.F.?
You chud. Was it J.F.?
See, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, nobody cares. J.F. Sebastian.
So that man plays a 25-year-old who's got Methuselah disease or something like that.
Methuselah disease.
Yeah, he's aging rapidly, and I was like, shit. Why does he talk like a little kid? And he's all, looking like that.
Well, I mean, that's William Sanderson. He was in your movie, Man's Best Friend, and The Onion Field.
So many movies.
So many movies. You never even heard of them all. What are we talking about?
We're going to talk about thieving midget gangs.
Is that not the best gang? Like, what would you prefer, dude?
I don't know. I just like one of those things that, we were talking about things I don't remember from Blade Runner, and then I'm watching it this time for like the 20th time, and I'm like, that's a thieving midget gang. What
about the men who are just the toys of J.F. Sanders?
Oh, Jesus. That long-nosed soldier, and there's a unicorn in there.
Yeah, I don't really...
Does he...
I don't really know what...
Fuck them.
Jarrett, can we end this now?
No, never.
Oh, fuck, so slow, dude. So slow.
So this movie's all at night.
Yeah.
It's all wet.
Accurate.
Neon. I think that you do get to see the sun at one point, but it's from an interior, and it's not even a real sun, because in the documentary it explains how it's like, no, it was all an optical effect to achieve all this, and it looks incredible. Mm-hmm. But it's like, yeah, it's set at dusk or something like that, and again, looks incredible. This world is like one of just darkness, wetness, neon. A visual feast, RJ. A feast.
A what?
A feast. Like,
I don't know what you think a feast
noodles.
Is, but... Well, I mean, noodles are pretty good. I don't know why people compare movies to food. I don't like the most delicious cinematography. You're like, what do you mean delicious? What do you mean?
Savory.
What do you mean by that, dude? So tell me more about how you think that it's a delicious looking movie.
RJ, what did you think of Blade Runner?
You want to hear something funny?
What?
So when we were watching it this week, I was like, Andy, I gotta watch my Criterion. And she asks me every week. She's like, what's your Criterion this week? Would I be interested in it? And the usual response is probably not. It's a 1950s French movie with subtitles. And she's like, yeah, I don't give a shit about that. I'm like, I didn't think you would. Because I don't either. So this week I was like, well, we're going to watch Blade Runner, baby. I was like, that's a pretty good show. And she's like, that sounds familiar. I was like, well, you've probably seen it sometime in your history of being alive. You've probably seen Blade Runner. She's like, well, we'll see. So we put it on. She's like, some of this is familiar, but I don't remember a lot of this. I was like, okay. And then we finished the movie, Jarrett, and she looked at me and she said, hey, that movie sucked. I was like, all right, nice. She explained to me why she didn't like it, and I could explain that here, but then we'd get hate mail in the email bake about why she's wrong. So I'll just take over that. I think Blade Runner is good. I like Blade Runner quite a bit, and I am kind of in the same opinion of you as you, where watching that documentary, Dangerous Days, it definitely gives me a better appreciation for the movie. It's like, man, it's a lot of shit that they went through for this thing, and it's like a lot went into it. That's really cool. And I'm a steadfast and always on the point of, if you need to know the context of a movie, that doesn't make it good. This is my one hypocritical stance where it's like, well, the documentary does make the movie more entertaining and you get more out of it. Long way of saying, I think Blade Runner is good. I like Blade Runner. I think it's got some nice visuals. I like the story. I like the source material, Jarrett. And I like Ridley Scott. I think he really shines in this fucking thing. There are certain things that I think he does really well, like his use of background, where it's not even just like images or like things in the background. Because in the documentary, they talk about all like the like Japanese writing and things like that, where it's like, this meant origin. That's why it pops up so much. Like, I don't mean that stuff. I mean like literal shots of stuff that's going on in the background, I think are impressive in this movie, because it seems like authentic to a point, but it's just like, I like that. Like, there's things going on in the background that I like.
Well, he goes to such depth. Like they explain how they were using for some of the movie, like Warner sets, like just general like backstage sets that were just laying around, and they're like, these will look like shit unless we disguise the hell out of the fact that we're using them. So we're going to shoot at night, which means that we have to wet everything down. So we're just going to make it all wet. And then we're going to put a lot of smoke in there. And then we're going to hang a bunch of neon signs on everything. So we have like, so it's dark, but it's lit from the neon. Then we can put regular lights on. We're going to make it wet so it just like glows. We're going to use matte paintings to like accentuate the space and extend it into impossible places. And we're going to design every element of the movie top down. Like the vehicles look real, and they're being made by people who really know how to fabricate and make things look authentic. The clothing, everything is just like designed and made, and it's all there, and it all fits and doesn't bring attention to itself.
Yeah, it's all there, man. And like, that's the thing, like everything looks great. The world is awesome. It's real dirty and grimy, and it's like, yeah, it looks like our world. Well, where we live now, Jarrett, the world sucks. So it could only get worse, I think is the point. And it will get worse. So that's nice. So you have that stuff. That's pretty cool. The use of colors is great. The use of smoke and neon is great. The use of those matted paintings is awesome.
Explaining the process of how like those matte paintings work, like how the guy doing really it had to like, he has to paint in all these like really hideous colors because he knows that once you actually expose it to the proper stock, it'll just look amazing, and it sure does.
Yeah, the explanation of the matte paintings is like super cool, and then the especially like the post-production part of that documentary where they're talking about like all the miniatures and things like that, where everyone's really surprised about what we did here, because they're all like a foot. They're like a foot by a foot, and everyone thought they'd be bigger. And it's like, but we couldn't do that because of the scope of the lens or whatever. It's like it had to be this very specific size. And you're like, man, that's cool.
My one nitpick on that documentary is that there's not any mention of the costumes. And
that's true.
And that's actually a big thing nowadays, especially post Game of Thrones, where it's like, because you look at those costumes and they're incredible. But in Blade Runner, for whatever reason, hey, who designed the trench coat? Who designed Roy's like leather outfit? Like everyone has like a coated outfit, and they don't talk about that at all.
Who designed those umbrellas that have the fluorescent light bulbs?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so like that's super cool. I've only ever seen the director's cut.
Yep.
Which I think is a blessing.
And
I guess.
You've seen the final cut, which is essentially the same. You haven't seen the voiceover before.
No, I've seen the director's cut, and then the final
with
cut.
a happy ending, with them leaving the city and they're driving through. That's literally footage of The Shining.
Literally footage of The Shining, the outtakes.
B-roll that Stanley Kubrick said, "Yeah, sure, here you go, buddy."
Yeah, I thought that part was really funny. They're like, "Hey, Stan, can we use this?" And he's like, "I don't really give a shit." He's like, "As long as it's not in the movie."
Yeah.
He's like, "Do whatever you fucking feel."
And you get Harrison Ford driving around with a pullover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I couldn't. I don't know if I couldn't watch that.
Broad daylight. It's painful.
There's just people, like, especially near the back end, like the last 20 minutes of the documentary, where they're like, there's those dudes that are like, I could watch either one. They both have a good place for me, depending on how I feel that day. And you're like, what?
If you grew up with it, I could see it. But I think in the world that we live in, it's kind of, no, don't ever. Yeah. No one does. No one was going to watch that version unless they're a masochist like me. And because I mean, you know what? We're doing this thing. I might as well do it now because I'm never going to do it ever again. And holy shit, it's awful. It completely ruins the movie.
Sounds awful. But
and then watching this documentary, we're just pimping this thing out. Completely.
Well, we're talking more about that than Blade Runner, but
it just elevates the movie.
It does. Yeah. It really does. Like, Dangerous Days is way better. It's way better than Blade Runner. It's so much more interesting to, like, because you see the entire movie through the extent of the documentary, and then it's like you'll see a scene and you'd be like, and then it'll cut to like Harrison Ford and he's like, yeah, this was a real fucking piece of shit to film. He's like, I don't like anything in this movie. They wanted me to like rape this chick, so I did.
Well, see, really and that's the thing where so the rape scene, I guess that was edited down into that because apparently initially it was more sensual and consensual, and then they cut around that and turned into like, what the fuck is going on here?
Slapping the door shut and being
slamming her around and saying, "Say my name."
He says something too, which is like ridiculous, where he's just like, she's like, "I want to leave." He's like, "Tell me that you don't want to leave," and you're like, okay.
But is that more of like an honest depiction of like the film noir trope of a man who like immediately seduces a woman, and you're like, no, this is what it would look like. It would be ugly and uncomfortable. Like Humphrey Bogart just like suddenly like cornering a woman and like, yeah, let your hair down. Let me show you a good time. It's kind of like more like
let me see them sugar tits.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe it's this is a commentary on the noir, RJ, in a way that people don't talk about these days, because again, like there's like so much surface level, superficial stuff you can talk about, as far, just like visually, and which is like, yeah, it's all there. It looks incredible. No movie looks like this, even when it tries really hard.
Even when they try really hard. So like, there are those parts of this movie, like we don't even really need to talk about it because it looks great. Everything about it is good. That final cut is awesome. That real slow build to all these stories. It's wicked. Everything that's there more or less needs to be there, like the Jason Voorhees dancers.
Yep.
Which I made a note of too. I know you posted that on the Instagram, but I wrote that same thing down. My biggest takeaway watching Blade Runner in 2019, Jarrett, was that Rutger Hauer is so much better than Harrison Ford. It's fucking unbelievable. Rutger Hauer is like a good actor. He's very good. Yeah. And I like how blunt he is in the interviews, where he's like, you know, a lot of people had a problem with the way this movie was filmed, like people on the crew. And he was like, so what? He's like, yeah, your job is fucking hard. He's like, get over it. Don't be a piece of shit. He's like, everyone's got hard jobs. Just do it. Do it. And I was like, man, you're really telling it like it is, Rutger. But like, he has so many soft, subtle facial gestures in this thing where he kind of like where he's like really playful, where it'll be like a soft smile or his eyes just move from like one part of the screen to the other. And it, like just watching him this time, I was like, man, he's fucking good in this. And then you watch Harrison Ford, and like, so I know you've been saying for years that Harrison Ford is just this like really slow, lazy old man. And then this thing, I was like, okay, I like Harrison Ford. I do. I think he's really good. I like Indiana Jones a lot. And then you watch it in this, and the thing that bugs me about Harrison Ford is his sloppy stunt hits, where every single fucking time he gets like hit by something or he's supposed to like act like he's hurt, he does this thing where he blinks a lot and he holds his breath, where he's like and he's like holding his breath and he has puffed cheeks and he's just blinking a lot. And I noticed it so much watching this time. I was like, what is he doing? Why does he do that? And then all I could think of, I was like, he does that in every movie. That's just how he like acts being hurt, is he's blinking and he holds his breath. It's very weird, man. It's very weird. Have you noticed that?
I can visualize what
now.
you're talking about. I can see what you're talking about.
Next time you watch a Harrison Ford movie, you'll notice.
It's
just this.
Yeah, when he's frozen in carbonite.
I don't know. Like I don't know. It's weird. It's weird.
It's weird. Yeah, no, I agree. Rutger Hauer as Roy, he's probably the most. The idea, I think, though, he's the most human, and that's the and that RJ is the delicious irony.
That is the delicious irony, where it's like and like that's why the movie is good. Where at the end, where he kind of like when he saves Harrison Ford, he's like, you know what?
I have a choice. Okay. I have a choice. I want to see.
He's like, I do have a choice.
In Mr. Blade Runner, you're just going around killing robots. Like, 'cause I got to do it. It's my job.
Yeah. I mean, I don't fully endorse the way that Rutger Hauer was just holding that dove for hours on end. It seems.
Yeah, I was like,
because in the documentary, they're like, well, he tried to let it go when he died, but it just it was so wet that it couldn't fly. It just flopped over. I was like,
he just walked away.
I was like, maybe. Not that it was wet. Maybe the dove couldn't fucking fly because it was in a man's grip for like 3 hours. Like, did no one think about that?
I'm sure that there was moments in between at that point because they kept having to shoot it, and then they hit like the whole thing. But like, oh, we ran out of time, and the sun came out.
It was the night of,
and then we had to like cut the goddamn scenery up and move it to another location so we could finish filming. It's just like stories like that. You're like, yeah, that's what movie making's all about: problem solving.
Movie magic, man. What are we going to do at the Bradbury? Let's lay cork down everywhere.
Yeah.
So, anyways, Blade Runner is spectacular for all the reasons that everyone already knows. But Dangerous Days is the real winner of this episode.
It will add so much appreciation to the movie.
Plus, you get a lot of insight into other things too. Like there's the they talk about the scrapped opening scene, which I feel like is used in 2049. Pretty much.
Speaking of which, RJ,
you
know what Dangerous Days doesn't do any favors to?
Blade Runner 2049 by Denis Villeneuve, the Canadian wonder.
Correct. So we also watched Blade Runner 2049 on this occasion,
and all of its supplementary material.
Yeah. So the tagline for this film: "There's still a page left."
Is there though, Jarrett?
30 years after the events of the first film, a new Blade Runner, LAPD Officer K, unearths a long-buried secret that has the potential to plunge what's left of society into chaos.
This breaks the world.
K's discovery leads him on a quest to find Rick Deckard, a former LAPD Blade Runner who has been missing for 30 years.
Again with the Rick, hey?
Yeah. Dick.
It's weird. Like no one calls him Rick. Just call him Deckard.
Hello, Rick.
Right?
Deckard.
Deckard.
Okay. Wow. Okay. 40. So I watched that 4K.
Sure you did.
UHD disc.
Damn right you did.
This is my first watch of this movie since seeing it in theater, where I was mostly unimpressed. I thought it was fine. which apparently upset some people. But anyway, I was watching the special features of these short films. I watched Blackout, this anime style short by the director of Cowboy Bebop and stuff.
So can I interrupt you and just talk about all of these short films in one breath? Blackout is completely pointless. It is an anime that has no meaning. Nexus Dawn is a deleted scene that has, again, no meaning. And Nowhere to Run is the only thing worthwhile. It's got Dave Bautista, and it's a minute long.
So I just want to...
Which is another deleted scene.
What I want to say, though, is these little shorts, they're all introduced by Denis Villeneuve, and he talks about how he wanted the right people to make these. You know, he wanted talented, good quality filmmakers to make these. So he got the Cowboy Bebop guy. Sure, he's probably a fan, like we all are. For 2036 Nexus Dawn and 2048 Nowhere to Run, he got talented filmmaker Luke Scott to direct these.
He was the right man for the job, was he not?
Well, we all know Luke Scott has really left his mark on the world, and it has in no way, shape, or form anything to do with the fact that his father is Ridley Scott.
Well, he made all those Alien prologues as well.
Yeah, that's his...
Because he was the right man for the job.
That's his lot in life. He's getting his son work, I guess.
So I'll let you talk about all these, but I thought they were all completely pointless and
except for Big Dave. That one actually felt like Blade Runner.
But it did. But it's like I said, it's just a deleted scene.
Otherwise, they're all short. Like they all feel like TV-ish short film. Like it's exactly what they are. But they feel like, oh, this is like a really good Blade Runner fan film with Jared Leto.
So I was really confused when I watched this Nexus Dawn because I was like, I've seen this before. I was like, isn't this in the fucking movie? And then I watched the movie again. I was like, it's not in the movie. And I was like, when did I watch this fucking 6-minute
it's probably
deleted scene?
Did you maybe watch it because it was put online earlier on?
No, Mike. I swear, I just thought this was part of the movie, and I was really confused. But then once it was over, I was like, I don't really give a shit. I'm not going to look into it very much anymore. But
the novel thing with watching the anime short was reminding me just like how much of an impact Blade Runner had on anime. And like just the way that Tokyo is presented and just like the prevalence of future noir and lighting from like many directors, and it's like that makes total sense. I'm sure this was like a dream project for somebody, but it's total fluff. It's like, oh, what's that blackout that's mentioned in 2049 all about? This tells you what it is. And why did they start letting robots be made again? Why are the replicants again? And it's like, oh, because he was threatening in a like Lynchian office space where the cameras
with
always
Benedict Wong,
where the camera's too high up. And then Nowhere to Run actually is like, oh, it's a nice little short story about poor Dave Bautista. But it doesn't have any Bautista bombs or spine busters, sadly.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, you're accurate. So, tell me about Blade Runner 2049, Jarrett.
Boy, oh boy. So I went into this enthusiastically. I was like, everybody loves this movie. And I'm talking like pretty well 90% of everyone that I follow who's watched this really like it, to love it, think it's like better than the original.
You should rewatch it.
I don't know. These people have rewatched it, but maybe they haven't watched Dangerous Days for a while, or probably never. Because
probably never.
I mean, honestly, you don't watch special features at all. You just happened to ask me if there was a Blade Runner documentary, and I went, yes, there is. There's one.
Well, there's 5. It seems like, but Dangerous Days is the best.
It does it all.
Yeah.
So after watching this showcase of technical ambition of how to make a movie from scratch, and stuff about how it's shot at night, all these details, these things, you're like, man, this movie is a real fluke that this thing got made. And yeah, sure, it's there's things about it that don't feel like a regular movie, and they're kind of don't feel like anything else, and maybe that's a problem because it lacks closure. It is extremely ambiguous. Blade Runner 2049 takes all of that away.
And then what do they do, Jarrett?
Lots of empty Roger Deakins shot spaces. They went to Hungary and shot a bunch of stuff there. And then they got Sid Mead to come in and design Las Vegas And that's like definitely the most Blade Runner-y thing that didn't exist before, like the actual like architectural stuff on the outside. And let's sexy this up. Let's get that Ryan Gosling. People love him. Just get that.
He is pretty sexy though.
Throw that brown trench coat on him. Everyone loves it. And people will be like, "What's this? What this sort of a really sweet trailer that showcases the color palette of our film?" Everyone's going to be like, "Ooh, baby, what is this?" They nailed it. They're doing it right, because sometimes when they do sequels, they miss it. They throw out all the obvious things.
They miss it?
They're like, let's go for our new look. Let's not just do what they did before. Let's replicate that stuff that people do, the callbacks. It's just like the contemporary Star Wars movies, the new cycle, where they're very much, people dislike the prequel so much. Now they're like doubling down, like making sure this looks like 1977 but 2019, like that kind of like level of attention, where like TIE fighters look like TIE fighters. Everything looks the way you always wanted it to. Let's dust off Harrison Ford. You know, he's not doing anything, but everyone misses him. And let's do it up. Let's find out what happened 30 years later. A question that I didn't give a shit about. I never cared about what happened next.
I'll just say, I think it really cheapens the original story. Where I sent you a quote from the back of the Blu-ray of 2049, where it says, "You don't even have to watch the original to appreciate this thing." Like paraphrasing, right? But I could. It's fucking on my shelf here. I could pull it off, but that's what it says basically. It's like, you don't even need to have seen the original to like this. And I was like, that's such a planned like thing to put on this, where it's just like, hey, you don't need the original Blade Runner. And you got 2049.
RJ, this stunningly elegant follow-up doesn't depend on having seen the original. Peter de Bruges, Variety.
So, I honestly, you're just talking about the story of this, but I actually do think it really cheapens the original, because I think the end of Blade Runner, like the final cut, is perfect.
That fast slam of the elevator is awesome.
It's perfect. Like you shouldn't have anything after that, and that's why it's good. So to put stuff on it, it's like,
well, that's, yeah. I mean, there's like spin-off materials that have existed for a while. There's like, I'm not sure if it's like novels or what it is, but there's like the Adventures of Holden, or like video games. I'm not quite clear on what format these things existed, but I mean, there's always been like people wanted to fill in the gaps. I mean, entire like cyberpunk as a concept is Blade Runner. I'm like, there's like the story, I think it's like William Gibson watching Blade Runner and being like, oh, fuck off, like, because he was working on Snow Crash or Neuromancer.
Neuromancer.
He was working on Neuromancer, and so he watched this break as he's writing, and he went, oh my god. And then like Philip K. Dick, when he watched Blade Runner, he was like, how did you do this? That's exactly what I saw in my own brain. And you're like, I mean, it's interesting that like how in touch and plugged in Blade Runner was in its era, and how much it's influenced everything, because it became the go-to cliche factory. There's this really great video game, Under a Killing Moon, the Tex Murphy games. It's just Blade Runner, but it's like kind of like a parody of it. And it's really cool. Like, I love those games. Are like so much fun. They're just goofy adventure games, but everything, like science fiction, was changed. The way, like this type of this weird pocket of like technology and the relationship of people with it. How do you depict that? Blade Runner is like an immediate predecessor for that. And then you could go back to like Alphaville, which again also doesn't get mentioned whatsoever in any of the stuff people are talking about, even though people mention often these weird connections to it. But it's like, well, because he's got a fedora. But I don't know.
It's more than that.
No, he has no fedora. He's just got that trench coat.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What else you got to say about 2049?
Well,
you want me to take over for a little?
I liked it less the second time watching it.
I agree.
All the problems I had the first time didn't go away. I kind of forgotten some elements of it. You can go back. I don't even know what episode I talked about my experience watching it was. It was like the weekend it came out.
Yeah.
Yours was the love character, I think, is just like the most, just the cliched like
Her.
angry woman character that like, but she kills people, so she's empowered. And you're like, nah, is she? Terrible. I hate that character. The stupidity of like Jared Leto's character, very overhyped. Because I remember when that was coming out, I was like, oh man, what's he going to do? What's Jared and him talking about it? And he does nothing. He's in 2 scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
well, and a prologue, Jared.
And a prologue.
Yeah.
We have the gold shimmering light of the Tyrell building.
The GoldenEye 007 temple.
And then it's transported to the new base of operations. And but it serves no purpose other than to symbolize this is just like what's in style 30 years later, but in like the exact same lighting, like the sound distortion because of the large empty spaces. It's all doubled down on. And like they're really, I watched the making of Blade Runner 2049. Just like it's only like it's 22 minutes long, and I was curious. I wanted to give them a break. I wanted to see, hey, maybe I'll have a greater appreciation for it after watching it. That did not happen. I mean, it seems like at times Roger Deakins made this movie.
I'm pretty sure Roger Deakins did make this fucking movie.
Kind of like he's like in those frames. He's like he was there all the time, which makes sense. He was the director of photography, right?
But, well, then he was probably like, Roger, I
this
believe
is,
that
bordering on racism here.
Roger, I'm Canadian. Denis Villeneuve is Canadian.
But is he a minority in our country, RJ?
Roger, I believe you can.
What is this?
Take the picture.
Now you're doing something else altogether.
Well, you threw me off.
Now it's like this Adam Sandler thing.
I imagine Denis Villeneuve was like, hey, Roger, go do whatever the fuck you feel like, because this is just whatever. It was just Ryan Gosling in front of a green screen, right?
No, that's the thing. Apparently, Denny's not a big fan of the green screen. That's all shot on location, and then they lit it up. There's all this emphasis.
Okay, well, that's
on, like,
more impressive, but still.
Because they shot that. No, he's like, I didn't want to shoot it in the front of the green screen. Like they only did it when it was necessary. Like when the ballerina projection. I mean, that ballerina was shot in front of a green screen that projected him. So a lot of it was like, I'm sure there are obviously points where they had a composite, like when they're walking around Blade Runner Los Angeles with the gigantic stuff in the background, that they didn't always go shoot on location in that place that doesn't exist. But those like giant rooms, they were filming those like in these giant chambers. And the thing though, with all those spaces that are so empty, is that they're empty. They're void. They're shot so far apart. So it's like this, like it just fills me like with, that's a nice image, I guess. But
I guess
I don't know.
Okay, you want me to talk about Blade Runner 2049 a little bit?
Yeah, go for it.
So when I watched this about a year ago, I was like, yeah, it was good. I liked it. I liked it way more than I thought I would, because I knew you didn't like it. Well, I knew you were like warm on it. Everyone else loved it. But then there was the general public who was like, whatever. So I was like,
yeah, both these movies, both financial underwhelmers.
Mm-hmm. So like, I went into it, and when I watched it a year ago, I was like, yeah, I really liked it. I watched it now, and I think I messaged you halfway through, and I was like, hey, this ain't a good movie. This is nowhere near like what I thought it was a year ago. And I think it's because when I watched it a year ago, I didn't rewatch Blade Runner before. The space between the last time I watched Blade Runner and then when I watched 2049 would have probably been generously, or like not generously, conservatively, like maybe 6 years. It had been a long time.
Okay.
So like, I hadn't watched it for a long time, and then watched 2049. I was like, yeah, that's good. And then this week, watched Blade Runner, watched Dangerous Days, and then watched 2049. And I was like, holy fuck. I was like, there's a lot of holes in this movie. Like, goddamn. So I was watching it, and there was there's so many things that I feel like people overlook, and you shouldn't, because it's like, yeah, I like Roger Deakins too, man. I think he's the best. It's like, but that just because he's the fucking doing the cinematography doesn't mean it's a great movie. This movie has so much fucking exposition. It's ridiculous. Robin Wright's character is just an exposition delivery vehicle.
Stupid chief in her garbage office. There's a shot that I think is so. There's a scene so badly put together, and it's so the camera kind of is like on the outside of the office looking in on a rainy window, and Robin Wright's looking out the window, and you can hear her completely like you were in the room, and she's admonishing Ryan Gosling, and the rain is just pouring down hard because well, Ridley Scott really is into water and he uses it a lot in Blade Runner, so we were going to do it in 2049 too. So it's always raining in Los Angeles because the environment's fucked. But we don't talk about that. We're not making that type of statement about the movie. We're just like, this is the world they live in. The environment's screwed. But there's the scene though is like the camera's on the outside and you're looking out, you're on the outside looking in, and you can hear her volume like completely clear, like you were in the room. Like that's not how you would do that. That's not this type of movie. Like you have to. It drove me nuts, and I'm like, that's so sloppy. But I mean, you want to be able to hear the character, but like, well, why did you set up the scene that way? Did they have this idea in their mind, like of how they wanted to do that? But when they actually shot it and then they mixed it and went, oh, that doesn't make any sense. No one's going to notice that except for Jarrett's. So who gives a fuck?
Well, so you have that, and then it's really weird, like
her office and the emptiness of his apartment and her office. I hate them. They're just empty voids. And then, oh my God.
So when you brought that up, the one thing that really sticks out with me is you're talking about like the way that the audio comes through. One thing I really noticed on this one was audio in vehicles. It is like intentionally muffled or something, and it's really off-putting watching it this time. Where when Ryan Reynolds, like in the opening, he's in his car and he's talking to Robin Wright, her voice comes off really weird, and it's like, oh, they're making it sound like it's in a car, and it's like, but it shouldn't sound like it's in a car because it's a movie, and you don't need to do that. And then like there's a scene later where it's like the replicant that works for Jared Leto, and like she's in a car and she's talking and it sounds like it again, and you're like, why are they doing this? Like it's just distorted audio, and it's very bizarre. It's like, why is that in here?
And
why is that in here?
Well, and plus like it's clear that technology has evolved since 2019, but it's also bad.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So there's that, and then
again, that's like that goes to the weird overthinking that's inconsistent. Because then, like the whole thing with them like being like filmed from outside, being inside a room, you'd have that distortion, but they don't do it. They just have it like regular, and I'm like, it's just put me out of it. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cruddy. Like, why? How did they miss that? But I don't know.
So there's that, and there's a lot of other things, Jarrett. So like when I was talking about exposition. Almost every character in this movie exists to deliver exposition. You got like Avon Barksdale, Wood Harris. You got that. You got the other like mortician guy who they call Coco, whatever that guy's name's like Dano Dalmatian or whatever.
He died for nothing.
For nothing.
Other than like you get the cool like him like kind of collapsing into his own neck. That looked cool, but
that looked really cool.
But then you're like, so, well, to what end? You're like, oh. So love can just travel around and kill people, and no one goes, we're not like, because I'd assume that like probably the technology allows, well, we can just turn off the cameras and then they just move like with impunity. You're like, oh, you think that someone would be on that case tracking down this murderous robot because we still live in a world with Blade Runners killing murderous robots. But in this case, it's like, nah, we're not worried about that. Nah. And she can do whatever she wants. And so you're like, well, where's the tension other than when she shows up? Oh, she's going to wreck shit. And you're like, well, yeah, but nothing matters then. Like,
there's no consequence.
There's no tension.
She is the consequence.
Other than what happens when those two meet up? And then they do, and then nothing happens. And then like, oh, he's left for dead, so he can just like be left behind in Vegas with the dog, and then the rebels will show up.
Well, yeah,
and
exactly.
And then they'll fly away back to Los Angeles.
Well, and like their exposition too. Like every fucking character in this thing is exposition. Even like Dave Bautista in like one of the scenes I actually like in this movie, in the opening, where he's just like, you do what you do because you've never seen a miracle. And it's like, okay, you're like, that's some fucking loaded language right there. Like, is that what this movie is going to be about, I guess? And I know that's nitpicky, and like I really hated when I saw Interstellar for the first time. One person, there were negative reviews about how Anne Hathaway's speech was about how love is stronger than like the feeling is stronger than logic, and the guy was like, "You got to show that, not tell. That's bad exposition." And I was like, "How do you fucking show that and not tell it?" So I'm sure someone's thinking the same thing about what I'm saying right now, but I feel like this movie has a ton of exposition, which isn't needed. Like Robin Wright, like, this breaks the world. We can't have replicants having babies. What are you, fucking out of your mind? And you're like, I got it.
With her permanent wet hair.
Yeah, with her weird wet hair, you're like, okay, I got it.
Everything's like so well lit. All the offices, like I'm going back to my
It's
office rant.
silly.
Like it's just like it just doesn't feel convincing because you look at Emmett Walsh's like blue smoke filled room looking at slides, and it's just like yeah, because like I mean they're going for that noir vibe. It's like well that's Blade Runner, and then this movie's like it's so clean. Everything there's so much space. Like everyone's like so much huge gaps between them. And then there's the Denny Villeneuve really chasing and pursuing his libido and like saying, "Hey, look at these ladies." Am I right?
So I have something to say about all that. So
Joey,
for Joy,
yeah,
it's so shoehorned in here where it's like, well, I mean, Ryan Gosling, even though he's a replicant, he is like connected to something on a different level. It's like, yeah, sure. But the way it's presented in this movie is very weird, where it's like he fails his not his Bechdel test, but let's say his Bechdel test. He fails that. He's what is it, like the Moinf comp or whatever?
Yeah, comp.
Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
So he fails like the replicant test. They're like, you're not even close to baseline. And then Robin Wright's like, I can get you out of the building alive, but the next 24 hours you're on your own.
Why?
And he's like,
why
okay.
Why is she doing this? Like,
well, yeah.
Well,
like,
you killed the because you just lied. Plus, he just lied. Yeah, I took
He
care
just
of
lied.
it because I'm the baby.
because he thinks he is, but he's like, I took care of it. So she's like, all right, I'll get you out of the building, but next 24 hours you're on your own. And he's like, okay. So he goes back home, and then Joy is like, hey, you ever seen that hit movie Her from Spike Jonze? And he's like, yeah, it's my favorite movie. He's like, I did the same thing for you tonight. I got a real life person I'm going to project myself onto. It's not audio, it's visual, baby. And you're like, all right. So they have this weird sex scene, but it's like, does he not fucking understand? Like, the entire scene going into this was about the severity of time, where it's like, you gotta get the fuck out of town, man. People are gonna come to arrest you and kill you and all that shit.
And he's like, what is his exit plan?
He has no exit plan.
No, wait, there's like, okay, I wasn't taking notes, and maybe I should have, but there's like no real like how does he jump to the like, oh, I gotta go to Vegas? Is there like a what is
There's,
that?
Okay,
maybe,
so he goes to the
blinked.
Somalian pirate from Captain Phillips.
That's that shitty scene.
Whatever his name,
Okay.
he's like Dr. Dan will get it for you.
Because he's got the wood. Yeah, he's got the wood
Yeah.
horse. He's like, hey man, I'll get you a real animal, but it's not.
His answer is, oh, that's old dirt. There's only one place that has old dirt. It's Vegas.
Nice.
That's all it is. That's that entire scene.
And so we can set that up later because all the other animals are in the old casino that Harrison Ford lives in. Maybe Harrison Ford does live in an old casino and just gambles all day long, because he is a senior citizen. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's like 82. That'd make more sense in this movie. By the way, he's got a dog violence. They blow that dog up and then they just leave it there. Dog violence, Jared. Yeah. But back to the sexuality thing. So like, she sets up this scene, which is just her ripped off. And it's like, okay, well, I feel like there's more important things than this, but okay, he's pleasing his woman. He's just making things right.
You can take me with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get stepped on. And it's like I really died, but who cares?
Well, and it's like, even they make the point of it later where it's like, I'll be your friend, where it's the other version. It's like, yeah, she meant nothing except that she did. So there's that. But the thing that I really had a problem with, Jarrett, not even the time sensitive nature of the hooker scene, but the fact that the hooker she gets out of millions of possible hookers is one of the 3 tasked to spy on Ryan Gosling. Mm-hmm. And she shows up. Oh. But later, is it not only revealed that she's a double agent, Jarrett? She's working both sides of the coin.
Both sides.
So, both sides. And it's just like, it's such contrived bullshit that in a different movie, if this was not a Blade Runner sequel by Denis Villeneuve, I think people would be like,
I mean, it is from the mind that brought us Arrival. Another heralded classic of cinema, except by me.
It's just ridiculous. And then, so this is a thing, like, it's not even a comment, or it's not a comment on this movie as much as it is like Blade Runner and then Androids of Electric Sheep in general, but specifically for this movie. So, like, there's the point of Jared Leto being like, yeah, replicants are safe now. I'm going to bring it back. Why the fuck do replicants not have a very visible, distinct visual feature to tell them apart from other people?
Like a unicorn horn?
Put a unicorn horn on their head. Make their hands fucking translucent. Make their head translucent. Like, it's because their whole thing is like, they're not safe. We can't trust them. It's like, all right, you know how they're going to be safe? And we can tell them from the rest of them? Put a fucking tattoo on their face, like Nazi Germany, like right on their head.
Wow, RJ. Tell us how you really feel.
Well, is that not logical?
I don't know. Himmler.
Well, Jarrett. I'm just saying, like, I know that, like, it's like, well, yeah, then there would be no story. It's like, yeah, I get that. Yeah. But in this sequel world where it's like, okay, replicants are a problem.
Well, they get like the little, like, they get the thing under the eyeball. And then you just pluck out your eyeball in defiance of your mark. That's what they did. That's what they settled it, and they cleaned their hands of it.
It's not enough. Make their, like, skin purple. Like, that's all you would have to do. Make their skin purple or something. And then it'd be like, oh, that's a replicant. So it's not like people walking around being like, skin job.
Oh, yeah, that's still going on. And it's like, you have a fellow cop going, fucking skin job. Or Skinner.
Skin jobs.
Yeah, that stuff. It's like, oh, we're still there, huh? It's like, well, society's gotten worse, the making of tells us. And I'm like, it seems about on par.
You're like, has it?
Wow. Though? Yeah. How do you think Harrison Ford enjoyed, though, sitting in the sinking ship with his handcuffs on? Do you think it was warm water? Do you think he was probably just miserable while Ryan Gosling's shooting a scene where he's strangling love to death, very dreamily?
I imagine that Harrison Ford has not wanted to be an actor for at least 40 years.
The movie has like no payoff. Like, it's such a fuck.
No, it doesn't mean
like,
anything.
He goes and saves Harrison Ford. Because
that's
so
it.
So the bad guy can't grow baby robots.
Well, even the mercenaries, it's like, who gives it? Because they never
saves him and
never come up again.
Because they never find it. Because it's like, so Jared Leto's still there. He's still somewhere, and bad robot's punished because it's an evil woman robot, of course. And he delivers Harrison Ford to Dreamweaver, which is the best part of the movie, the idea of that, and they don't follow up on any of it. And then he puts his hand on the glass. Hi, I'm your dad. And then the end. And you're like, oh, there's no ambiguity. It's like, is it because the door? It's like is it a callback to him like almost like slamming? Because no, he doesn't even slam the door behind him. It's just the elevator door slam on him. But then this one opens up with his hand extended and being like smiley.
Hi, I'm your dad.
Yeah. Now
I'm going to be playing the role of your dad.
I'm all your dads. So good. Anyways, yeah, Blade Runner 2049. It's no Blade Runner.
Very true.
And hey, RJ, let's find out who hates Blade Runner.
Probably a good few people.
Well, it has to have probably the most watches of anything that we've covered on the show. It's got like 250,000 logs. Yeah, that's
a few more than butt crack.
Few more than butt crack. First up, let's take a look here. We got Joe Hadley.
Oof.
Half a star. From just like a week ago. There is a reason it took me this long to get through this movie. It's so dark, and the sounds just put me to sleep.
Cool, Joe. It's a very cool thing of you to do. Joe's got a few 5-star movies. It's like Avengers, Guardians, Thor.
Yeah.
You know what one of his 5-star movies is, though, Jarrett? Your favorite film director, Edgar Wright, Baby Driver.
Yeah.
He also just gave half a star to Strip to Kill, which I watched not too long ago, and it's not a good movie, but it's not a half a star movie.
Well, I mean, it's as good as Blade Runner.
Allegedly. Yeah. Apparently.
Next up, S. Nomi, half a star. With a quote from the film, "Wake up, time to die." Let me start off by saying that Blade Runner cinematography, while it was beautiful and all the digital effects were eye-pleasing, the plot was pretty bland. I found myself lost in thought for most of the movie. That's a bad thing. The theme of AIs taking over has been used in multiple films. What the fuck? But has AIs, but has been twisted in ways that either slow them being good or emotionless metal objects. In my mind, I believe that the director's way of depicting them is right. It is the humans who put emotions behind the soulless piece of metal, not the other way around. Well, how about those digital effects?
There aren't any.
Correct.
So I think this person's confused. All their 5-star movies are Fast and the Furious movies.
There you go.
And then Raw and A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is a very bad movie, my friends. Very bad.
Ariel Castanon Castillo, 0.5 star.
Oh.
This movie was not the most interesting movie. The camera angles and the story plot were extremely boring personally. I wasn't expecting certain points of the story, but other than that, the camera angles were bad and did not interest me.
Okay. Oh, that's weird to say. Okay, I've uncovered something strange that I didn't mention before, but so all 3 of the last people you just brought up, all 3 of them have the almost exact same recent activity. And by almost, I mean they've all had 3 out of the 4 same movies in their recent activity.
Huh.
Blade Runner, Ex Machina, Royal Tenenbaums. So Ariel Castanon Castillo, Ex Machina 4 stars, but Blade Runner 0.5 star. Tenenbaums 4.5 stars. The last person gave Tenenbaums 3 stars, and then all of these people, Jarrett, have given Swiss Army Man 5 stars, which is like weird. And then they've all given Obvious Child 5 stars. They're all friends.
Yeah.
Every one of these peoples.
Okay.
They're all friends, which is very weird.
One more from this calendar year.
Okay.
Ryan Avery, 0.5 star. I literally can't watch it. It's just bad. There's nothing to it. It's bland and terrible. Like, I swear, the CIA could use this movie on repeat to torture someone. I couldn't even watch it one time through.
It's too bad for him. He's missing out.
It is. So, this movie's like really not contemporary, though. This movie,
no.
Like, it's...
Okay, so here's the thing, though, Jared. This person is not part of that fan club that the last 3 were in.
Okay. But
they just gave 5 stars to not just Bohemian Rhapsody, but also Deadpool the movie. Other 0.5 star films include The Shining by Stanley Kubrick. Not Mick Garris's Shining.
Oh.
The Stanley Kubrick Shining. So, what are you going to do?
Nothing.
That's weird, though, that all those people had those same things. They got to be friends, right?
Probably. They watched it all within a day of one another or something.
They got to be friends.
There you go. All with these takes, all these people talking about bad camera angles and digital effects. And
what does that mean?
I don't know. That's how people are talking about movies, I guess.
Okay.
But.
Okay.
Anyways, I think that's it. I think this has gone long enough.
What have we been talking for like 4 fucking hours?
4 years.
Jesus, it feels like it.
And now we die.
Hey, did we ever talk about Blade Runner, the movie?
A little bit.
Just a little bit?
Just a little bit.
Okay. Now we die.
After the break, now we die.
Good.